In this video, we'll cover some of the other inputs we have not yet seen, including things like checkboxes, radio buttons, selects or drop-downs, and text areas. So if we go back to the MDN page for the input element, as we already know, there are quite a few different types, and the ones I'm going to focus on right now are checkboxes, which, just like every other input, we create using the type attribute. So type equals checkbox. So why don't we start there? And if you look at how this works, it's input, type equals checkbox, no surprise there. We can give it a name, give it an ID so we can label it. You definitely need to label your checkboxes, otherwise it's very confusing and difficult to know what this is actually pertaining to. What am I checking? But then we can specify if the checkbox is checked to begin with or not. So we have control over that. And there are times you may want it to already be checked. For example, if this is an edit form, so I'm editing something that's already been saved once, and you want to display what I previously decided, you would need this to be checked. Anyway, let's try it out. So let's make a new form down at the bottom here. Write an H2. We'll just call this more inputs. Inputs. And then down below, we'll do a form, and our action will just, it doesn't really matter, but /birds. And then in here, an input type equals checkbox. Refresh our page. There's our single checkbox. And then we can add in a name. So what should this checkbox be for? Maybe I agree. So agree to the terms or something. How about just agree will be the names, or agree _ terms of service, TOS. And then we can give it an ID. We'll just go with agree. And then a label. And you can put the label before or after. It really depends on what you prefer and if you're working with a designer and all of that. But we can move them around. But let's just do our label afterwards. And this will be a label for agree. And this will say, I agree to everything. Sure. Refresh. And now we've got our checkbox. And the label is connected so that I can click on the label to check it. That makes a big difference, especially on mobile. These checkboxes can be pretty tiny. And then the last thing I would do is just show you that we can have it begin as checked if we want it to. So now I refresh and it begins checked off rather than what we had before where it just starts off unchecked. Okay, so other than that, if I do submit this form, so why don't we add a button at the bottom? This is going to take us to /birds. Is that what I did? If I check it, what you probably, hopefully can see up here is that it sets agree terms of service to be on. And then if I just don't check it, so I'll refresh and I'll uncheck it and click submit, it doesn't send anything. It's just missing. So that's how checkboxes work. Again, we're not handling that data anyway, so it doesn't matter much right now. The next input type we'll take a look at is a radio button. Radio buttons are pretty similar to checkboxes, except for one key difference, which is that in a group of radio buttons, you can only select one. So one of these choices and only one. So they're connected, and the browser knows if you click Louis, it's going to have to make sure Huey and Dewey are unclicked or unchecked. So it's still a yes, no, right? Is this yes or no, yes or no, yes or no? But we only have one option. We can only pick one in that group. Compared to a checkbox, we can have both of these checked or none of them checked. So to do this, it's a little bit more complicated. It's just input type equals radio. So that part's not bad. Let's do that down here. Let's maybe add a paragraph, and then we'll add an input type equals radio. Also, I don't know if you just saw that. I did INP tab, and it gave me type, name, and ID all ready to go. So type is going to be radio here. And on its own, a radio button is just that right there. So I could make a couple of radio buttons. I could make 3 of them like this. But at the moment, they're completely individual. They're on their own. They're not connected. And I want them to be a group. I want you to pick one or the other one, however many I have. To do that, I need to associate them by giving them the same exact name. So name, name, name. So why don't I give them each a name? What should my radio buttons be for? How about maybe shirt size or something? So we'll go with size, size, and size. we don't have any values or anything to look at just yet, but you'll see if I click, I can only have one of them selected now because they all are grouped together. They all have the same name. So in the browser's mind, they all point to the same thing. So the next thing we should do is label each one of these. It's up to you where you want to put the label. Once again, if it's before, if it's after, if each one of these is on their own line. But for now, let's just do a label here that just says extra small. And here I'm going to go with XS as my 4 and then an ID of XS. So they should now be paired up. I click here. I've toggled that radio button. And then I'm just going to duplicate that. So label for small, which will just be S, ID of S, label for medium, and ID of M as well. Okay, so now I have these 3. I can click the label or the button, and they're grouped together. I can only click one. Now, I gave them a name of size, and if I select medium and I click submit, take a look at what was sent through. This is important. It sent size, but it said size is just on. Well, that's not really helpful, right? We want to know which one of these was selected. And to do that, we have to add on a particular attribute called value. So whatever we have in this value is not going to be displayed to a user. Instead, it's just what is sent through when the form is submitted. So as an example, here I could put value of LOLOL like that. I refresh this page. We don't see that anywhere. But if I select extra small and I submit, can you see that? I hope it's showing up. I'll just paste it here for good measure. Size is LOLOL. So whatever that value is what will be sent to the server, what will be submitted. So we want each of these to have a value as well, and they should be unique. So I'm just going to go with extra small there. Usually we want something small and self-explanatory. So for sizes, extra small, small, and medium makes perfect sense. Value equals M. Okay, so that looks good to me. Now if I select one of them and submit my form, let's agree to that. And let's go with medium, submit. And now you can see up top, we've got agree terms of service is on. That makes sense. It's just a checkbox, yes or no, on or it's not present. And then size is set to M because that's the one option out of those 3 I had selected. Okay, so that's radio buttons. A couple of new things there. The value attribute, very important in order to actually send a value, which still we're not using, but eventually we will. And also making sure that we add in name to group those elements together. Name, size, size, size. This way we can only select one of each. Cool. Next up, we have the select element, which is essentially a drop-down menu. And it actually is the product of 2 elements working together, a select element and then option elements. So the select is the parent. It groups together a bunch of options. And each option is pretty straightforward. It has some text in between the opening and closing tags. That's what we actually see here. Capital H hamster, for example. And then we have a value attribute, just like we did with our radio buttons. And this is what will be sent through when this information is submitted. So the select is where we put the name and an ID if we wanted to label it. And then we have options. So honestly, it probably would have been a better example to do a select for your shirt size, but let's just come up with something else. So let's do a select here. What should we select? What sort of drop down? How about, I don't know, let's say that this is a wedding reception or something. And we want you to pick a, please select a meal type, something like that, an entree. I don't know. Okay. So we're going to have steak and chicken and vegetarian and fish or something like that. So we'll add in a name in here. We'll call it meal. ID will be meal. 4 on the label is meal. So they're now associated. And if I refresh, we've got our select, but there is nothing in there. So let's add in our options. Option, and this first one will be fish maybe, and the value will be fish. But we could have something else like, vegetarian. Is that how you spell that? And then this could just be veg. If we wanted to have a shorter value that is sent to the server, it doesn't really matter though. And then we'll have, how about steak? And that could be steak as well. Okay, so let's see what we end up with here. Great. Please select an entree. We've got fish, vegetarian, and steak. Let's submit that. Submit. And you'll see meal is set to steak. Whatever that value was, not the text we see here, but whatever that value is here. So this could be something entirely different. Something you'll see sometimes is the first option being sort of a dummy or placeholder option. The value is just nothing, empty quotes, and then something to distinguish it or to make it clear that we're asking you to please choose an option. You don't have to do this, but this is something you will see. And the other thing that we can do is actually have something pre-selected like this with the attribute selected on any option. Now vegetarian is pre-selected when you load the page, but you can change it. Okay, so that is the basics of a select and the option elements. They work together. You use option inside of a select, and that's kind of it for that.